What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've talked quite a bit about Game Freak when it comes to Pokemon. However, they have created games outside of that franchise. One in particular on the 3DS had a bit of a surprising announcement yesterday as it's headed to a platform that no one expected. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be going back to that Bandai Namco Nintendo project that seemed to pop up due to a job listing. Well, it had a bit of an update the other day. And we're also going to be talking about CES, which is now in full swing. We're getting some interesting announcements. One in particular is a very strange looking controller that I wanted to go over here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Sony and their own event at CES. That will be happening later on tonight. For me, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And it appears they won't be showing off anything when it comes to new TVs, and that's something that they typically do every year, where they'll show off newer technologies that they're working on, seemingly for their Bravia line. And yeah, I know we see these events, or you go to them, and you're gonna probably find items and sets and different things that you're never gonna actually buy because they don't even have a price tag on it to begin with. One company showed up like yesterday with a 57-inch ultra-wide OLED monitor for PC, and it didn't have a price tag on it. That's all you need to know when it comes to the consumer side of things. But the fact that we can now rule out TVs for Sony makes us think, well, I guess legitimately they have the PSVR 2 as their main headlining piece there with the thumbnail. Yeah, I guess they're going to be talking quite a bit about virtual reality, and apparently they will be talking about the electric vehicle that they are working with Honda to bring to market. And one thing they talked about was putting a PlayStation 5 in the car itself. So I guess we'll find out what Sony has for us later on tonight. Again, that's 8 p.m. Eastern time. Also, the FTC Microsoft case continues to roll along here with Activision Blizzard's acquisition hanging in the balance. And it's led to some really weird looking headlines, some of the strangest ones I've ever seen in gaming. For example, this one was making the rounds yesterday. This from Forbes, although a lot of them looked like this. Microsoft tells the FTC it doesn't know Call of Duty's release date, budget, anything. This from Microsoft's response to the FTC in a complaint. They say Microsoft lacks knowledge or information sufficient to form a belief as to the truth of the allegations concerning industry perceptions of Call of Duty and Call of Duty's original release date, or as to the truth of the allegations concerning Call of Duty's launch and typical release schedule and the resource and budget Activision allocates to Call of Duty, including the number of studios that work on Call of Duty. I'm sure Microsoft, in this case, what they're doing is FTC shows up with a bunch of, as they would say, assumptions without sources, and they go, hey, tell us what your sources are because we're not confirming or denying any of this. We're going to play dumb. Most people, I'm sure, I shouldn't say, most people probably know that Call of Duty released on PC back in 2003, and I'm sure there's some people that think it came out for the first time on consoles with Call of Duty 4, as that's when it really got pushed in the mainstream. But yeah, it started almost 2 decades ago now, which is wild to think, as Call of Duty has been a massive success for, 80% of its life on the market. But in this case, it's just more legalese from Microsoft to the FTC, but it's led to some pretty funny headlines. Oh, and something to keep an eye on here, especially as we head towards 2024, when I think we'll hear more about it, that being Persona 3 Remake. This was rumored for a while, and now it's been basically reconfirmed by the same source that reported on Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4, and 5, all going into Game Pass days before it was made official. This over on Reset Era, and the idea here is them saying yeah, it's still happening, and when asked why is Persona 3 Portable coming out, they simply respond, well, it's Atlas. I can't really push back on that. Atlas is also the company alongside of Sega, I'm sure they made the decision for this, that Persona 5 Royal comes out on PS5 rather than give the free upgrade path to the PS4 owners. They told you to buy it again. So I guess they're going to release Persona 3 Portable, and then Persona 3 Remake comes out probably a year or two later, and it's going to be just buy it again. Although I would like to see Persona 3 get remade. Apparently it's going to be brought more within like the line of how Persona 5 plays, the quality of life, the visuals, and that is a PlayStation 2 classic that I would like to see brought to modern platforms now with those features. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Bandai Namco and Nintendo in this project that got a bit of an update the other day, as it appears that, yes, they are still working on this, so I guess it's still a thing, but it made headlines because, of course, we had a certain YouTube video go up not too long ago from Masahiro Sakurai that we'll get to here in a second, but let's take a look. This is the job listing that everyone was talking about. Career employment 3D action game / game designer. If you remember months ago, we talked about a job listing that seemed to confirm that they were working to bring lower resolution or lower quality backgrounds up to be higher quality, and yes, higher resolution, all this for what we would presume to be the Switch. But we can see the job description says you will develop as a planner for a 3D action game project commissioned by Nintendo. So not even really trying to hide it there, which, by the way, they may throw that name in there just for recruitment purposes. You realize, oh wow, okay, I'd be working on a larger title from obviously one of the big platform holders out there. It might be worth jumping in on this job opportunity. And you can see work in charge, the concept of the game in cooperation with the background art team, which is actually what we had talked about previously with the job listing, mentioning kind of sprucing up some of the background elements. So the fact that this is thrust right back into the spotlight with a lot of speculation that Nintendo will have some sort of event, obviously probably a general direct, as they like to start out the year with those typically in February, that maybe this is something that could be getting ready to be shown off. And after Sakurai had his video where he talked about the difficulty that he had set up in Kid Icarus Uprising, kind of dropping a little teaser there, like, wouldn't it be great if someone out there could make Kid Icarus Uprising work on modern platforms like, I don't know, the Switch. And then you see Bandai Namco, who spent a lot of time, a very long development with Smash Bros. Ultimate, working alongside of Sakurai. Seems like a good development studio and publisher to go to if you need help, maybe taking Kid Icarus Uprising from the 3DS and making it look a bit better so it will play on the Switch. And I've seen speculation all over the place that this could be a number of different titles that Bandai Namco could go back and help Nintendo bring to the Switch, because they've worked on a lot in general, so Nintendo very clearly trust them. They've worked on an entire Pokemon game with new Pokemon Snap most recently, and you can go all the way back to games like Mario Baseball that they were even tapped to work on. So it's not a new thing for them to bring Bandai Namco in to help run support or just full on develop a title, but I'm still right now sticking with the front runner that we will indeed see Kid Icarus Uprising get revealed, most likely in a direct here soon, I'd say, because we've talked about how the Switch is kind of getting towards the end of its life. Seems like you'd want to fit Kid Icarus Uprising in sooner rather than later, take advantage of that large install size, give it a much better shot than it had on the 3DS. Not because the game ran poorly or anything there, I just feel like it was a game that was too big for the system, specifically because of the controls. So you bring it over to the Switch where you have that second analog stick by default, and yeah, I'm sure it'll look better and run better there as well. Really give people a shot at the game, and then maybe we can continue that series on with a follow-up leading into the next generation for Nintendo. So here's hoping we see Pit flying around as they reveal Kid Icarus Uprising for the Switch in a direct not too far off. Next up, let's talk about CES and a very strange controller that Dell showed up with, and it's for their concept NIX, which they presented, I think it was last year. It's a server that goes in your house, so I guess you could put it in your basement or just off to the side, and the idea is you can access it from different screens in your house. So rather than have to haul around your PC or I guess game console, you just connect to the TV and you would have it run through your network. And I think they still have some logistics to work out and explain. And I do question how many people would be jumping on board with just having a server somewhere in their house and moving between displays that way. I kind of feel like most of us are just all in on the idea of building or buying a nice PC, planning it somewhere in the house, and that's just where you play your games. But they did want to show off a controller specifically for it, which you can see here. I guess just the concept NIX controller. And yeah, Engadget did a nice write-up on this thing and video showcasing it. you can kind of see one of the odd things about this is there's no D-pad, and that's something that a lot of people pointed out immediately because I feel like every controller should have at least a serviceable D-pad. Not everyone is going to have a good D-pad, but just a way for you to press left, up, right, down with just a button press without having to worry about it being a joystick, I think is a must. Instead, they replaced it with a touchpad, which is useful, especially if you have a Steam Deck now and you've never had a touchpad on like a handheld device like that or a controller. This probably made you realize just how much potential there is for it. But to remove the D-pad for it is, I don't know, it's a little weird. The font on the A, B, X, and Y button, little off-putting. They also have RGB all across the bottom, but some of the things I like. All right, so on that bottom, there are two different buttons, kind of hard to see, but they act as scroll wheels almost, and that carries over to the shoulder buttons at the top that do react to touch. So if you want to scroll through pages or sections or parts of the game that are mapped to the scroll wheel, you can just move your fingers along the R and L buttons. And while this is a very strange controller and probably not one I'm going to be checking for much in the future, it is sort of the essence of CES. You show up with a concept of a product and you get feedback and suggestions, then you go back to the drawing board and see what you can come up with. For me, you got to fit a D-pad somewhere on there because I think there are some pretty cool ideas here, especially with the scroll wheel R and L buttons at the top, but it's a very odd thing to have a controller like that without any kind of physical D-pad there. I mean, I got on the Joy-Cons for just having arrows, but at least buttons, but at least they were physical buttons. So that's my big suggestion here, Dell, and also maybe figure out who exactly wants to buy the Nix server in the first place. Next up, let's talk about Game Freak and a game from the 3DS that they had developed and released years ago, and it's a very odd concept and description for the game, but people seem to like it. The Metacritic score is actually good. It's better than Scarlet and Violet, but it's not going from the 3DS to the Switch. That's typically what you may expect, especially from maybe Game Freak working alongside of Nintendo for other projects. No, instead, it's going to Apple. Take a look at this. This is posted up over on Nintendo Life. It says the good news is that the cult classic 3DS title Pocket Card Jockey is getting a new modern release with revamped 3D visuals for the horse racing events. The bad news is that it isn't coming to the Switch. Instead, Pocket Card Jockey Ride-On will be released exclusively on Apple Arcade for iOS devices. So they're going to remove the dual screen support. I guess they've worked around the logistics there. They're also revamping, upgrading the visuals somewhat because obviously go from a 3DS screen to an iPhone screen or any of that. It's not going to look the best, but I took a look. Some people were pretty excited about this game just being mentioned again, and I saw some even say it's their favorite 3DS title, so I looked at the Nintendo page for it. Pocket Card Jockey at $7, and it's a mix between solitaire and horse racing. That is, you know what? That's actually creative. I have to give Game Freak credit, as I was pretty rough on them when it came to Pokemon and them following the same formula over and over again. They changed that up a bit, and they also had a solitaire horse racing game just kind of waiting off to the side this entire time, and I didn't even know it. Now, I will say for those disappointed that this is going to Apple Arcade and not necessarily the Switch, because the 3DS shop is shutting down in 2023, so I guess this is a way for Game Freak to at least get it onto a digital storefront that will still exist. Typically, these Apple Arcade deals have some sort of timed exclusivity, so I would be shocked if a year or so from now, maybe Pocket Card Jockey showed up on the Switch as it is currently, since they've already done the work to shrink it from 2 screens to 1. That's kind of my thought process in the future, but it is interesting because you don't think about Game Freak when it comes to games outside of Pokemon, but if you look at their track record, they have created games for all kinds of different platforms. In fact, back on the PlayStation, they made this Trauma Center-like game that the name's kind of escaping me now, but I saw that, I was like, that's a weird one, but then you go through the list of all the different titles they've done, and yeah, they've been around for a bit longer than Pokemon. That was really their big break, I would say, and now that's all they're really known for. But hey, I guess good to see that they'll at least have Pocket Card Jockey available somewhere other than the 3DS shop, because That'll be gone pretty soon. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Nvidia at CES, as they had a couple of announcements, one of which we were definitely expecting, that being a new video card. Newish video card. The 4070 Ti is indeed real, and in fact, it's coming out this week. We can see this posted over on Ars Technica. Says Nvidia announces GeForce RTX 4070 Ti launching January 5th for $799. And yes, as expected, it's basically that unlaunched 4080 variant, the one that was 12 gigabytes. I believe that was priced at $899. However, so they did lower the price by $100. And so here's where we are with video cards now anyway. If it's sub $1,000, seriously, that's where we are, and the performance is decent, it's all of a sudden a good card or good budget card. Budget cards back in the day were $200 or less. So we've come a long way, I guess, in that regard. But I will say, Nvidia making some pretty lofty promises here, saying that this card at $800 will outperform the 3090 Ti. I would absolutely wait for independent benchmarks before you put a stamp on that one and just go out and start picking up this card. Although it is at this point, that's their best offering when it comes to their newer 4000 series cards with pricing in mind. Although we'll get all kinds of charts and graphs from some of these independent reviewers that will line it up when it comes to price versus performance. But yes, the 4070 Ti, real as expected, and yeah, it's that 4080 12 gigabyte model. We also had Nvidia talk about their GeForce Now program. It's a subscription at the ultimate tier that's $20 per month and allows you to basically use rigs they've built in their data center to play games you already own on a platform like Steam. Currently, those rigs have 3080s installed, but Nvidia did say they were going to upgrade them to RTX 4080s without changing the $20 per month price. So if you're on that now and you're taking advantage of the 3080, you'll just have that plan upgraded and now using an RTX 4080, and that will come with a bunch of extra features, which includes higher frame rate, also G-Sync compatibility they've been working on in order to lower overall input latency, which is the consistent fight when it comes to any of these streaming platforms. However, GeForce Now has been pretty good when it comes to responsiveness, and yeah, especially with the video card market now, I get it. Some people don't mind the idea of cloud gaming in general, and the fact that this allows you to use, I'll say, select games from your library, because it's not all of them, and that's something that we're starting to realize, that the streaming rights situation in the future is, that's gonna be a whole thing to figure out there. But for people who are using GeForce Now, it does look like you're at least getting an upgrade to their newest cards. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played any of Game Freak's other games outside of Pokemon? 10% say yes, 39% say no, and then 51% say they make games other than Pokemon. Yeah, that sounds about right. Most people look at Game Freak and they just relate them completely to Pokemon, despite them attempting to make other games. I think two most recent ones they've made that were on the Switch, Giga Wrecker and Little Town Hero. Little Town Hero wasn't very good. I bought it and just disappointed. So I get why people kind of gloss over that one after it came out. I feel like there was at least some interest in it as we were going towards its release, but afterwards that was kind of it for that one. But as you can see, Game Freak trying other stuff. They've been doing it for a while, and they're not necessarily tied to Nintendo. If they want to take a deal with Apple for their arcade platform, they can do so. I think Pocket Card Jockey will probably go to the Switch after whatever the timed exclusivity is there with Apple, because makes sense for them to move it to that platform. I'm sure there are many people who had it on the 3DS who now have a Switch, and they'd like to pick it up there too and see how it plays there. But for now, yeah, it's going to Apple Arcade. We'll see what happens whenever that timed exclusivity stuff runs up. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Panzu, says, I feel like the Square Enix announcement might be the Final Fantasy IX remake that was part of the Nvidia leak, I think, and rumored for a while in general. It has been rumored for a while. I believe it was part of that Nvidia leak list. I'm trying to figure out where it fits in, though, in the next year or so, considering we have Final Fantasy 16 and then Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, which I think that's going to be first quarter of 2024. They just say winter right now, so give some space to Final Fantasy 16 and kind of drop that one, I think, in the first quarter or so for the following year. Final Fantasy 9 Remake, I think it'd be interesting to see how far Square takes it Will they go the route of Final Fantasy VII Remake and just kind of mess around with the storyline and create a whole new game, essentially? Or will they do more of a remake, but stay very true to the source material, like completely, right? So that's the question there. But the reason I thought Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered is because that's a game that I feel like could fit in between Final Fantasy 16 and between Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and not take up too much of the spotlight. Right? It's not going to be another big blowout remake or something. It's going to be a remaster, a game that many longtime Final Fantasy fans remember and would really like to see on current platforms. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's Dell's Concept Nyx controller. How do you feel about a controller without a D-pad on it? And then also, what about that Bandai Namco Nintendo collaboration? What do you think they're working on? Is it Kid Icarus or is it something else? And then Game Freak's 3DS title making its way to Apple Arcade. Did that surprise you? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.